had power over my life for 4 years, and I've struggled for 4 years.
50 years you run consecutive to all murder convictions at counts 1, 4, 7.
In the shadows of prison walls, some inmates inspire terror unlike any other. Their notorious acts of violence and chilling histories make them the most feared men behind bars. For the first time, we're catching a glimpse of these infamous figures caught on camera, men whose crimes sent shivers down the spines of both the public and their fellow inmates. If you read much about serial killers, they go through what they call the different phases. Starting with number 10, Thomas Edward Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein was born on February 4, 1952, in Long Beach, California. From a young age, he faced challenges that would shape his notorious life. His mother, Virginia Conway, divorced her first husband while pregnant and later married Thomas Conway, whom Silverstein believed to be his biological father. After this marriage ended, Virginia married Sid Silverstein, who legally adopted Thomas. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood, Silverstein was shy and often bullied. Virginia instilled in him a harsh lesson. If he came home crying after a fight, he would face punishment from her. This taught him to stand up for himself, albeit in a way that would lead to a lifetime of violence. At just 19 years old, Silverstein was incarcerated for armed robbery, serving 4 years in San Quentin prison. However, his brief taste of freedom was short-lived. He soon found himself arrested again, this time with family members for multiple armed robberies. In 1977, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison, ending up at the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. Here, he became associated with the Aryan Brotherhood, a neo-Nazi gang notorious for its violent criminal activities. In 1980, Silverstein's life took a darker turn when he was convicted of murdering an inmate, Danny Atwell, who had allegedly refused to smuggle heroin into the prison. This conviction landed him a life sentence, leading to his transfer to the high-security facility at USP Marion, Illinois, where he lived under constant surveillance. His life there was marked by violence and further infamy. He received additional life sentences for murdering other inmates and even a correction officer. The most shocking of these incidents was the brutal stabbing of correction officer Merle Cutts, orchestrated by Silverstein himself with the help of fellow inmates. By the time he passed away on May 11, 2019, Silverstein had spent 36 years in solitary confinement, solidifying his reputation as one of the most feared inmates in the U.S. prison system. He died due to complications from heart surgery, leaving behind a legacy of violence and brutality. Now, this prisoner in the image was known as the Titan. He towered over even the toughest officers with chains around his waist that struck fear into the bravest hearts. Stories about his past crimes were so terrible they were hard to believe. Let us know if this is the first time you've seen him like this. Now, this prisoner in the image was known as the Titan. He towered over even the toughest officers with chains around his waist that struck fear into the bravest hearts. Stories about his past crimes were so terrible they were hard to believe. Let us know if this is the first time you've seen him like this. Number 9. Nico Allen Jenkins. Nico Allen Jenkins, born on September 16, 1986, in Omaha, Nebraska, is a name that sends shivers down the spine of many. His early life was marred by violence, and after a series of tumultuous events, he found himself in prison for carjacking, serving just over 10 years. Unfortunately, Jenkins's mental health issues went largely unaddressed during his incarceration, leaving him to grapple with his demons alone. Upon his release on July 30, 2013, the lack of supervision would prove catastrophic. Just 2 weeks after regaining his freedom, Jenkins embarked on a chilling killing spree that shook Omaha to its core. He lured 2 men, 26-year-old Jubana and 25-year-old Jorge Cid Cajiga Ruiz, to a secluded area under the pretense of a meeting. In a shocking act of brutality, he shot both men in the head and robbed them, leaving their bodies abandoned in a pickup truck. Jenkins didn't stop there. His third victim was a fellow inmate named Curtis Bradford, whom he murdered just a day after taking a friendly photo with him. Jenkins's most heinous act came when he shot 33-year-old Andrea Kruger, a mother of 3, with a 12-gauge shotgun, leaving her lifeless on the road. The grisly nature of his crimes was captured on surveillance footage, leading to his capture on August 30, 2013. During an extensive interrogation, Jenkins offered a chilling confession, claiming that he was influenced by an ancient serpent god named Apis, adding a bizarre twist to an already horrific tale. His trial was a spectacle of unpredictability. Jenkins chose to represent himself, often acting erratically, speaking in tongues, and laughing during the testimonies of his victims' families. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death, sparking a renewed debate about the treatment of inmates with mental health issues in the correctional system. For many, Jenkins became a symbol of terror, with the echoes of his actions reverberating through the community and leaving families shattered and grieving. Number 8. Alvin Francis Karpis. Alvin Francis Karpis, born Alvin Francis Karpavicius on August 10, 1907, was a Canadian-American criminal of Lithuanian descent whose life of crime began at a young age. By the time he was 10, Karpis was mingling with gamblers, bootleggers, and various shady characters. His formal entry into the criminal world came at 19 when he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted burglary. However, Karpis managed to escape and teamed up with fellow inmates to continue his life of crime, including a notorious partnership with Fred Barker at the Kansas State Penitentiary. Together, they formed the infamous Barker-Karpis gang, specializing in bank heists, kidnappings, and violent crime. Karpis quickly gained a reputation for ruthlessness, particularly after the gang's involvement in the killing of Sheriff C. Roy Kelly, which further cemented his status as a formidable figure in organized crime. The Barker-Karpis gang's reign of terror came to a swift end in 1936 following a series of escalating violent encounters with law enforcement. Their capture was highly publicized, particularly after the kidnapping of Edward Bremer. The case drew the attention of President Franklin Roosevelt and intensified the FBI's manhunt for Karpis and his gang. After being apprehended on May 1, 1936, in New Orleans, Karpis faced a swift trial and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He spent an astonishing 26 years in Alcatraz, where he became known as one of the longest-serving inmates. Released on parole in 1969, Karpis faced a world that had drastically changed since his imprisonment. No longer feared as a criminal mastermind, he struggled to adapt to life outside prison walls. Eventually deported to Canada, he faced challenges due to his previous criminal record, which prevented him from securing a passport. In search of a quiet life, he moved to Spain, where he passed away on August 26, 1979. Initially deemed a suicide, his death was later determined to be due to natural causes, closing the chapter on a life defined by crime and notoriety. Charles Bronson, born Michael Gordon Peterson on December 6, 1952, is notorious for being one of the most feared figures in British prison history. His story begins with a tumultuous childhood that laid the groundwork for his later violent tendencies. Even as a young man, Bronson exhibited an inclination for aggression, engaging in street fights that cemented his reputation as a formidable combatant. His transition into the criminal underworld escalated dramatically in 1974 when he attempted to rob a post office in Luton armed with a sawed-off shotgun. Bronson found himself in a violent shootout with police, injuring several officers before his eventual capture. The ensuing trial showcased not only his erratic behavior, but also his complete disdain for authority. He disrupted court proceedings, assaulted prison guards, and exhibited explosive outbursts that earned him a reputation as an unpredictable and dangerous criminal. Due to his violent conduct, Bronson was deemed mentally unstable and transferred to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital. However, even within those walls, his aggressive nature persisted as he assaulted fellow patients and attempted hostage situations. During his time at Broadmoor, he adopted the name Charles Bronson, inspired by the Hollywood actor, reflecting his desire for a more significant persona. As his notoriety grew, so did the security measures taken to contain him. Bronson was shuffled through various maximum security prisons, including Parkhurst and Wakefield, each time under stringent protocols to manage his violent outbursts. Despite facing harsh conditions, Bronson turned his confinement into a path of physical transformation and creative expression, authoring a book titled Solitary Fitness that offered insights into his life and fitness routines. His infamy culminated in 1998 with a dramatic hostage situation at HMP Birmingham, where he held 2 inmates at gunpoint, demanding a helicopter for his escape. The standoff lasted for hours, showcasing his audacity and the chaos he could create even in confinement. Today, he remains a symbol of defiance within the prison system, leaving a legacy that is both feared and fascinating. Richard Lee McNair, born on December 19, 1958, is not your typical criminal. His criminal career is highlighted by a series of daring prison escapes that have earned him a place in infamy. McNair's journey into the criminal world began with a botched robbery that led to a murder conviction in 1987. Rather than resigning himself to a life behind bars, McNair became obsessed with escape, showcasing a remarkable talent for evading capture that soon became legendary. His first escape was nothing short of a magician's trick. McNair managed to slip out of his handcuffs using only lip balm and sheer willpower. Although recaptured, this initial feat only fueled his desire for freedom. For years later, he executed a second escape, navigating through ventilation shafts like a ghost slipping through the night. However, it was his third escape in April 2006 that solidified his status as a master of evasion. In a brazen act, McNair concealed himself among stacks of used postal mail bags, leaving law enforcement baffled. When an officer finally spotted him while jogging near railroad tracks, McNair was quick on his feet, concocting a story about merely exercising and claiming he was staying at a nearby hotel. His ability to think on his feet allowed him to slip through the cracks yet again, and he even made his way into Canada, where he continued to evade authorities. McNair's escapades caught the attention of law enforcement, landing him on Canada's 15 most wanted list multiple times. However, his luck ran out in late 2007 when an observant officer recognized a suspicious van, leading to a chase that ultimately ended with McNair's capture. Today, he resides in ADX Florence, a supermax prison known for its strict security measures, where inmates spend 23 hours a day in isolation. Despite his current situation, McNair's legacy as a cunning escape artist continues to capture the imagination of many, embodying the notion that some criminals are always one step ahead of the law. Charles Edmund Cullen is perhaps one of the most chilling examples of betrayal in a profession dedicated to healing. As a nurse operating across various New Jersey hospitals, Cullen hid his heinous crimes behind the trusted guise of caring for the sick. Over the span of 16 years, he confessed to taking the lives of 40 patients, with 29 confirmed murders. The thought of someone tasked with saving lives instead ending them is a haunting realization that sent shockwaves through the healthcare community. Cullen's nightmarish saga began to unravel on December 12, 2003, when he was finally arrested. Initially facing charges for 1 murder and 1 attempted murder, the gravity of his crimes soon became apparent. During interrogation, Cullen confessed to killing 2 patients at Somerset Medical Center and ominously hinted that the actual number of his victims could be as high as 40. The courtroom drama escalated as he displayed no remorse for his actions, even taunting the judge during proceedings. In April 2004, Cullen pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 2 attempted murders, all committed through lethal injections. In a controversial plea deal, prosecutors spared him the death penalty in exchange for his cooperation. As part of this deal, Cullen provided insights into his crimes, ensuring his name would remain etched in the annals of criminal infamy. Cullen Van Dam agreed to help identify more of his victims, shedding light on the disturbing question of how a person could betray the very oath to do no harm. On March 2, 2006, he was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences, and he now remains incarcerated in New Jersey State Prison in Trenton with no chance of parole until he reaches the age of 443. His legacy serves as a dark reminder of the fragility of trust in environments meant to foster healing. Lucy Letby, born on January 4, 1990, has emerged as one of the most notorious figures in recent British history, now infamously known as one of the most prolific juvenile killers. Her career as a neonatal nurse began in 2011 at Chester Hospital, where she initially garnered praise for her dedication and care for vulnerable infants. However, this perception soon turned on its head as a troubling pattern of deaths began to unfold in the neonatal unit where Letby worked. Concerns were raised by Dr. Ravi Jairam, a senior doctor at the hospital, who noted an alarming increase in baby deaths and serious health crises linked to Letby. Despite his attempts to alert hospital authorities in 2015 and 2016, his warnings were largely ignored, resulting in devastating consequences for the infants under Letby's care. As the death toll continued to rise, her colleagues began to notice unsettling behaviors. They described Letby as dismissive and even hostile during critical moments, further raising red flags about her involvement. In May 2017, the Chester Constabulary initiated an investigation into the alarming incidents within the neonatal unit. By July 2018, Letby was arrested, marking a significant turning point in the investigation. "I'll move that seat forward a bit short, just had new surgery," she remarked. "Oh right, okay." Her trial, which began in October 2022 at Manchester Crown Court, revealed chilling evidence against her. Handwritten notes found at her residence depicted a troubling self-image with Letby describing herself in harsh terms. Despite facing 22 charges, she maintained her innocence, claiming she had always strived to provide the best care possible. The prosecution presented a compelling case alleging that Letby had deliberately caused harm to at least 12 infants through lethal means such as air injections. After a lengthy 10-month trial, on August 18, 2023, the jury found her guilty on 14 of the 22 charges. She was sentenced to a whole life order for each offense, ensuring that she would remain behind bars for the rest of her life. The chilling case of Lucy Letby has left a profound impact on the medical community and the public, prompting a re-evaluation of practices and protocols within neonatal care to prevent such a horrific tragedy from ever happening again. Rodney Alcala's life is a harrowing tale of violence that began in San Antonio, Texas, on August 23, 1943. Born as Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Boiro, his childhood was tumultuous, marked by abandonment and upheaval. When his family relocated to Los Angeles, Alcala's troubled life continued to spiral. He enlisted in the army at just 17, seeking purpose, but was discharged after a brief stint due to a breakdown and subsequent diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. "Wow, what a challenging role," he remarked. Despite his troubling past, Alcala managed to present a charming and charismatic facade which he exploited to lure unsuspecting women. Pursuing his passion for photography, he adopted the alias John Berger in New York City, where he promised glamorous opportunities to potential victims. Tragically, this was a ruse. Among his first known victims was 23-year-old Cornelia Krill, who was brutally raped and strangled in June 1971. Another victim, Ellen Hover, vanished in July 1977 after agreeing to meet Alcala, a meeting that would cost her life. Alcala's chilling confessions in 2012 confirmed his involvement in the murders of both Cornelia Krill and Ellen Hover, among others. Although he received a sentence of 25 years to life, the scars of his actions linger, haunting the families and communities affected by his violence. Despite his eventual capture, the darkness of Alcala's crimes continues to resonate, leaving a painful legacy that reminds us of the dangers that can hide behind a charming smile. John Wayne Gacy remains one of the most notorious figures in the annals of crime, instilling terror even in the hearts of the toughest inmates. His childhood was marred by an abusive father, paving the way for a life filled with deception and horror. After a brief prison stint in 1968, Gacy escalated to a much darker existence. Between 1972 and 1978, he became a predator, luring young men to his home where he would commit unspeakable acts of violence. Gacy's facade as a successful businessman and community clown allowed him to mask the sinister impulses lurking beneath. When authorities finally dug up the grounds of his property, they unearthed a macabre graveyard holding the remains of 26 young men, revealing the extent of his gruesome atrocities. The investigation relied heavily on dental records and X-rays, making the identification of victims a painstaking process that underscored the horror of Gacy's actions. His trial in 1980 captivated the nation, revealing a complex interplay between claims of multiple personalities and the prosecution's portrayal of a calculated killer. Despite Gacy's attempts to present himself as a victim of his own psychology, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was ultimately convicted on 33 counts of murder, bringing a sense of closure to the victims' families, but leaving an indelible mark of fear on the community. Gacy's legacy continues to haunt Norwood Park Township and those affected by his heinous crimes, reminding us of the darkness that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary life. Dennis Rader, infamously known as the BTK Killer, was born in Kansas in 1945. From a young age, he harbored dark fantasies of torturing and murdering women, but it wasn't until January 1970 that he would inflict unimaginable horror on innocent families. His first victims were the Otero family, Joseph Otero, age 38, Julie Otero, 33, and their two children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, age just 11. Rader's brutality was stark. He bound, tortured, and killed the entire family, marking the beginning of a horrific series of murders that would grip the community in fear. The terror did not end with the Oteros. In April 1974, Rader struck again, this time targeting 21-year-old Catherine Bright. He employed his cruel methods once more, binding and strangling her before leaving her for dead. Over the next few years, he continued his reign of terror with victims including Maureen Hedge and Vicky Weger, all while maintaining a facade of normality. By day, Rader was a respected member of his community, serving as the president of the Christ Lutheran Church and a Cub Scout leader, effectively hiding his monstrous side beneath a veneer of respectability. As the body count rose, the pressure on law enforcement intensified. Rader's insatiable craving for attention ultimately led to his downfall. In 2005, after sending a floppy disk to a television station detailing his next intended victim, investigators were able to trace it back to him. His capture sent shock waves through the nation as the man behind the heinous BTK moniker was finally brought to justice. In a chilling conclusion, Rader was charged with 10 murders and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Today, he resides in the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas, where his horrific legacy lingers in the minds of those who lived through his terror. Each of these criminals is undeniably deadly. Which of these prisoners do you find most terrifying? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For further updates, subscribe to our channel.